What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Boundless Perception YouTube channel. And today we are back with another awesome episode, and we're going to talk about large cosplay printed 3D props. I have a whole lot to say about them. Hopefully I can give you guys some tips that will help you avoid the mistakes I have made if you want to make large props. I absolutely love making them because the level of detail is amazing. And you know, if you're working on something else, 3D printer is printing that. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal where it's like you're kind of working on two projects at once, you know, sort of, kind of. That's the way I like to look at it anyways. But before we jump into that, hopefully you guys can see my shelves up here. I have printed, I think since that last episode, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think another 4. So I have to print one more to go right down here and then something to go up there. But as of right now, my printers are currently, all 4 of them are, well, one of them is on a 4-day print. The other one is on a 2-day print. No. Wait, one of them is on a 4-day print and the other 3 are on 2- and 3-day print. So it's gonna be a little while before I have access to them. But in the meantime, we're gonna talk about props and some pitfalls that you guys can hopefully avoid if you plan to do large props. So let's get into it. Alright guys, so hopefully if you've been watching this channel for a while, you will know, as I said, I love to make large props. I've done an episode on all of these props. Right here we have Black Cliff Slasher from Genshin Impact. I just recently did that one. We have Wolf's Gravestone, also from Genshin Impact. And a while ago, I made, boom, Jinx's Fishbone from League of Legends. So as you can see, I really like to make large props. These all printed in sections. When I printed this originally, all I had was 1 CR10 and 1 Ender 3. So I printed this on 1 CR10. It took, I think, about a week to make. So this is the finished product. I did have to throw away, I think, 2 other attempts at it. So hopefully I can help you guys avoid that today. And that brings me to my very first tip. Tip number 1 is going to be cut your print correctly. What I mean by that, cutting and slicing are 2 very different things. I've mentioned this before. Cutting a 3D printed object is like cutting it in the program, actually breaking it into sections. Whereas slicing it is where the program slices it by layers and tells you basically how many layers you're gonna have to do to create this object, where the supports are gonna go, all that. So right now we're just focusing on cutting it. Jinx's Fishbone was cut into 3 parts. I wanted each part to be flat. What I mean by that is where they join right here, I've yet to fill this line where they can join right here. And then I don't know if you can see this one as well, there's one right here. What I did was when I cut this thing, I wanted it to have flat parts to connect to one another. That allowed a huge surface area for the glue that I was using to make a really strong bond. As you can see, this right here is just glue holding this together. It's extremely strong. So really try to maximize your surface area when you're cutting things, as it makes gluing it together a lot easier. And I mean, this doesn't even have wooden dowels in it. It's just literally glue and it's held together by it. And I guess this is tip 1.5, I'm gonna go ahead and combine it into this, is that when you are cutting, make sure, once again, that you have a flat surface. And what I mean by that is do not cut, for example, let's say we were to cut it right here. Then that means that when it prints, there's just gonna be this little tiny area that prints separate on the printer, like this part right here would print separate, and you would have to glue it onto there. There's obviously not as much surface area right here as there is right here. So by allowing this to be attached to the larger surface area, I don't have to worry about this breaking off. This is a lot more sturdy because it's not glued together. It's just 3D printed together. So that's tip number 1. All right, so now that we have our cutting down, let's go to tip number 2, which is going to be to use wooden dowels. I'm gonna place Fishbone right here, and focus on Wolf's Gravestone. As you can see, I am holding Wolf's Gravestone, let me just do it this way, simply by the handle. And I'm shaking a little bit because it is pretty heavy. This was printed at 20% infill. Oh, I got a little bit of dust there from the wall. But there are actually not wooden dowels, but metal dowels stretching into each section. Wolf's Gravestone was printed in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sections I used to print Wolf's Gravestone. And connecting each section is a wooden metal dowel in between each part. And I really opted for this because, once again, there's not as much surface area as there was on Fishbone. The surface area is, you know, about that thick. So I don't really know how to describe it, but it's just basically just know that there's not as much surface area for the glue. And I was very concerned that when I held it this way, it would snap and not support itself. So I had to use metal dowels that ran the length of each section. So I don't have one that's just going all the way up and down. I want to clarify that. It's not just like 2 rods that are going all the way up and down. It's 2 rods in each part that simply go into each section. So definitely use wooden/metal dowels. So continuing on our tips, we have dial in your supports correctly. What do I mean by that? Well, let me see if I can give you guys an example here. Okay, yes, this is perfect. So let's say with Wolf Gravestone here. This piece I printed, imagine you cut away this half of the sword. This piece was printed in 2 separate parts. And it sat on, let's see if I can demonstrate this, on the print bed like so, just like this, vertically. And only this piece right here was touching the bed. That means out here, supports would have to be printed because you can't print in midair. So supports had to be printed. Well, only supports were maybe in around this area right here. There were not supports originally for this entire area. So I went in and I added supports because sometimes the printer will generate supports in a very small area and it'll be like a very fine line. And that fine line, though it can succeed, a lot of times it fails because, I mean, it's just one little line of supports that's just constantly building up. And as it builds up, it gets, you know, wobbly. So I added in more supports, turned it into like a square, which is a lot more stable, and just built it up that way. I had to make sure I had that set correctly before I printed, as you know, obviously I would have wasted a lot of time because it would have got up to that part and probably would have failed. So that's definitely a really big tip. So make sure your support settings are dialed in correctly for any areas above the printer, well, you know, that are going to be higher up on the print that have, you know, a really long overhang, I guess that's the best way to say it. So dial in your supports correctly. Our next tip is going to be try to use the same brand of filament. What I mean by that is try to stick with whatever brand you're using. If you're using eSun, if you're using Amazon Basics, if you're using, what's the other brand I use? Sunloom, stick with that brand. I say that because although the filament is supposed to quote unquote act the same, a lot of times it acts very differently. I wish I had saved one of the prints I did from this really bad batch of filament. It was the filament that came with the printer. For some reason, it just would not print supports. I really don't understand it, but every time the printer tried to print supports, it would just skip an entire section. I have no idea why that was. And you know, fortunately I have been doing this for not long, but a little bit of time. And I realized this is just a filament problem because I would have been trying to re-level the bed. I would have been checking the nozzle, been looking for clogs. I didn't know what was going on. But since I had a little bit of experience, I was like, oh, this is just a filament issue. So I swapped out the filament. Issue was resolved. So definitely try to use the same brand of filament. And I say that because as you build larger props, maybe you run out of filament. Let's say you're looking at Fishbone here. Maybe you run out of filament right here. Your filament sensor tells you, boom, you run out of filament, you have to change it. Well, you may be using a new filament and it's going to do something really weird up to, you know, the rest of the print. And that's assuming if the print does finish. So from here you were good, and now this part may be messed up, which means you've wasted all this time because you have to basically restart the print. So try your best to use the same brand of filament. I know it's not always possible, but try your best to use the exact same brand. Our next tip is going to be to use glue and, well, gel glue and liquid glue. When I say that, let's look here at this sword. Let's say, okay, I don't know if you guys can see it here, but the sword is joined into 2 pieces right here. Well, what I did was, again, my large surface area, I put gel glue in the middle. And then once it was glued together, I used the liquid glue to go around the outsides because I knew it could fall into the cracks. So I used 2 combinations of glue. I have tried using, what is that called? Glue sticks. They don't work. I don't know, maybe some other people can get them to work. I can't get glue sticks to work. I just don't understand it. What I mean specifically is, you know, hot glue. I don't know, it just won't work for some reason for me. Maybe it'll work with some other type of filament, but it will not work for me with PLA. I haven't tried it on like PETG or elastic filament or anything like that, so that's just my next tip. Definitely use glue, both types of glue, gel glue and liquid glue. The next tip we have on the list is going to be to scale your parts properly. I have an episode that I have scheduled, I haven't filmed it yet. Basically, I printed an item and it looked really good on the printer. Well, not on the printer, in Cura. And I've been working with Cura for a while, so I compared it to a few other items inside Cura. I was like, yeah, this will be fine. It wasn't fine. It came out too small and I printed the whole thing. So I basically wasted all that filament because it's just the prop is too small for what I want it to be. It needs to be, basically almost like not double, but a good little bit larger than what it is. Had I actually just took the time and not been lazy and scaled it properly, I wouldn't have had that issue and I wouldn't have wasted that filament and the time. So definitely make sure you scale everything to what you want it to be. If you're using Cura, if you're using Crush a Slicer, I recommend using Armor Smith because you can get everything in proportion. So Cura uses millimeters. A lot of times, here in the US, we're using everything is in feet and inches, and we don't really understand centimeters and millimeters, conceptually as well. So if something is like, 700 millimeters, I don't really understand what that means. I don't know what that looks like. So I'll, even if I convert it into feet, I understand, 5 feet, 6 feet, but when I put it beside my model in Armor Smith, then I really get a grasp of exactly what we are looking at. So definitely make sure you scale your part accordingly, as you don't want to waste filament, which is money, and you don't want to waste time, which can also be money. So make sure you get that done. This next tip is definitely one I've mentioned before, and that is to merge all of your items inside of Cura, whichever slicer you're using, before you print them. I had that problem. You guys can go back to one of my older episodes and see where I printed out the entire chest piece and I did not merge them and then split them and slice them in my slicing software, or cut them in my slicing software. And as a result, I basically tried to eyeball them in Cura and line them up in Cura as much as possible. And I was like, oh, I can make it work. You can't. So definitely make sure that you merge them, scale it inside your slicing software. Once it's scaled, then disassemble it, unmerge it, I guess is whatever, and then cut it. So do it in that order. It will save you a really big headache. I'm telling you, that is a really important step. I learned that lesson the hard way, so don't do that. Next tip is going to be to try to limit your total print time. What I mean by that is, the print time is the print time. It's what it's gonna be. It could be a day, 5 hours, 2 hours, a minute, whatever it's gonna be. But do your best to see if you can limit the total print time, because that limits the amount of time you have for a mistake to happen. A print could be going well all the way up to 85, 75, 95%. And then that last 5%, last 25%, 30%, whatever have you, will just completely screw up your print. So if you shorten the amount of time that things are on the printer bed, you shorten your amount of time for potential errors. I'm trying to think, I've had that happen a few times where something will be 45, 50% completed, and then all of a sudden I'll get warping occurring. I had one where, let's see, I don't know, all of a sudden the nozzle hit the print and knocked it off. I don't know why or how that happened. And I also have this running theory that printers only mess up when you're not there. Because almost every major error I've had has been when I've been asleep overnight. And I don't know why that is. If I sit there in the room for like the majority of the print, they never mess up. So I don't know why that is. But long story short, see if you can minimize your print time. Don't skimp out on like, your what do they call, your support settings in order to do this, or try to speed things up to make the printer move faster, beyond a reasonable limit. Just try as much as you can just to limit the time within an acceptable range. So that's my next tip. This next tip may be possibly one of the largest on the list, if not the most important. Everything could be going well on your print. You're having a good old day. You're like 75, 85% of the way there. It's been 3 days. You're like, man, I've done this. This print is gonna come off. I'm gonna, get it all assembled, go to the con, show off all my hard work. And tragedy can strike. Tragedy can strike in the form of basically when the filament runs out on like a CR10 with the filament sensor, what will happen is the printer will actually cool. So the bed will cool, the nozzle will cool, and what will happen is your print will no longer adhere to the bed, because I mean, that's what happens when the bed cools. It's supposed to pop off. A lot of times if you're sitting in the room, you'll hear it pop off. So I learned that lesson the hard way. I was like, oh, I have a filament runout sensor. I'll just come back and change it whenever. Came back, thing no longer adhered, and when I went to reprint it, it wouldn't work because it started to move. So I'm sure there's a way to prevent that. There's a setting to prevent that. I haven't learned how to do that yet. I don't know if you have to alter the code. I haven't learned how to alter G codes yet. I'm sure I'll learn that eventually on this 3D printing journey. But that's a really, really big one that I had to learn the hard way. Do not let your bed cool off. So have a good idea of when your filament's gonna run out. You know, you just start to learn it as you 3D print more. You just look at the filament roll, you look at what percentage you have, you look at the item you're printing, and you just like, you know, get in your mind like, yeah, I'm probably gonna have to wake up in the middle of the night and check on this. So definitely make sure you do not let your print bed cool when you are changing your filaments and printing something massive. So that's my next. Last but not least, our final tip is going to be probably another very difficult one, and that is going to be persistent. I am in several Facebook groups for 3D printing, you know, cosplay props and just 3D printing things in general. And a lot of times I'll see people who are just like, you know what, I'm done with this stupid machine. I can't get it to print right. Leveling doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. They just don't like it and they get out. And that's because, man, these printers are not plug and play. I have said that before. I really thought they were, you know, get it out of the box, hook it up and plug it in, start print. No, like they are weird. I kind of feel like they're sentient because they all behave in their own really, really crazy way. Like I have 4 printers and I just know which printers I can do certain things on. Like that one doesn't like this for some reason. The print can all be the same, the filament's the same, the nozzle's the same, the extruder's the same, everything's the exact same. Print temperature. For some reason, certain printers just don't like certain things and they just behave their own way. So I'm like, oh, that's the problem child today. I just know you're not liking things. That one is good today. It just wants to, you know, print everything you put on it. So definitely be patient, learn your printers, understand, you know, more and more about this hobby. Like every day I'm learning something new, literally every day. I'm like, oh, didn't know what that setting did. Oh, didn't know what that one did. Oh, I didn't even know you could print that. So definitely do that. I think eventually, probably not even closer yet, maybe not even the end of this year. Hopefully maybe next year I'll start branching into other filament types. I really want to experiment with elastic filament, so I think I'm going to make that happen. But in the meantime, PLA has been serving me well. So that's what all of these are printed in. I'm loving them still. I need to move on to the next part of this journey, which is painting, but I'm not there just yet. So right now I'm still printing. And when I do get to the painting phase, I'm gonna have a ton of things I have to paint. But that's basically going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed these tips. I hope they help you out. If you didn't see my previous tip video, I will link it at the end of this video, as I really, really wish someone had just told me a lot of these things. I mean, I'm probably sure they did in some other videos and I either don't remember or just didn't watch them. But oh my gosh, like knowledge is invaluable, and yeah, there's a lot of mistakes, errors, and money I could have saved myself had I just listened to other people. So definitely, you know, take some of these tips to heart and enjoy this hobby because it is really fun. So thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Look forward to many more. And as always, stay boundless. See you guys. Bye-bye.